而当真就心机配，真就心光白呢，你的光白多的，你叫我起码两个的，你托家，你我就搞吧，托家他的米店了，你地区这边的，你地区东啊些个Lamrim人吃的，你他的米搞方给地区的农具啊的。你地点里所属嘅人们只有国来的，两个嘅国把这，但係真係心公平嘅，態度國把的，呢也眼咧國把態把的，他們就見被國方推嘅咧，實際當然就嗰三啲事咧，就係但係呢個真係心比心公平嘅的，那嗰所嘅全部都冇什配合的啦，兩個我哋國把的態度眼咧國把的態度心比嘅三把，也對你對不接話啦。也我接完了，你了呀，呢，几乎我哋嗰幫透過都身邊嘅心了，也我接完了，對於對唔接完了，幾乎從我的同埋南人把了心了講到些的啊，但係我了嗰幫透完了，呢幾乎真的同埋南人那麼只麼都講過的是，那第講呢的呢，朋友經驗講就心的透完了，那個講過的是呢。你講你就講過的是，講你就講，就是那講把的你就佢嚟接完了，你呢？讓佢聽到，嗰個基本嗰是科學嘅，科學同啊深大，啲那些讓佢聽到，我所嘅同啊深大都是真係講過嘅，啲咁呢，你講你是記住嘅，啲呢講就係記住嘅，係，但係就嘅，但係Lamrim人這個人不如是馬上呢都學過嘅，係人不幫人不如是啲呢些係，加上都聽過書咯。
Good morning. Last night, we continued to look at this presentation of how, first, by coming to understand what the benefits are of bodhicitta, namely, which are presented in a twofold manner, the temporary and the final benefits, with the temporary benefits being that one, through cultivating bodhicitta, one will be sure of gaining a good rebirth, a rebirth as a human or god, and not falling into the lower realms. Moreover, as with attaining a good rebirth, one will also have all the required favorable circumstances to continue one's spiritual development. This then will lead to the eventual attainment of the final benefits of bodhicitta, the state of enlightenment or Buddhahood. So giving rise then to understanding those benefits, reflecting on them again and again, one gives rise to a determination to achieve such a result. Then from there one can follow in one of two methods. One which comes down to the same thing, but one can either, through wanting to achieve the goal of Buddhahood, start training from the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, and build on that the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, and then engage in the practices of a practitioner of great capacity. So in this way, one recognizes that the trainings that are shared with practitioners of initial and intermediate capacity are the preliminaries to engage in the trainings of a practitioner of great capacity. The alternative method, which comes down to the same thing, but is to, when having given rise to a wish to achieve the benefits of bodhicitta, then one knows one needs to generate the causes of bodhicitta, which are love and compassion. But to actually be able to generate love and compassion, one needs to cultivate their cause, and the cause of love and compassion is to reflect on suffering oneself experiences, the sufferings of the higher realms, as well as being aware of the potential sufferings that may befall one in the lower realms. So these are two different directions one can approach the entry into the Mahayana, but both of them require the same sequence of trainings. So continuing with this key point that was made, that when one reflects on suffering, one needs to reflect on suffering based on one's own experience. We then come to a quotation from Shantideva's Engaging the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So in the handouts, it's in the middle of page 81, and in the published book, it's at the top of page 71. If those beings have never before felt such an attitude for their own sake, not even dreamt of it in their dreams, how could it arise for the sake of others?
제가 심지에 대다 남라 원 랑게도노 디레스 밀람도야 마미나시데다 아주 지당아 저기 닐람나리아 저기 ngo소라리 마존에 닐람나 통야로 쇼로바다 지나신 제산데 심지엔 탐질레 팬디 주역이 팬디 주역에 심지에 탐지 팬디 주역이 된다라 심지에 탐 산요고바 토고 쳔베 삼로디기 삼로상보 시엔 심지에 탐질레 팬버 동아시엔 디유 주역이 팬바 개침보 삼로디 아니 소소라랑게 된다 이냐 된도 있냐 데네게 셈지 밀름도야 통요요 말스 녀마당 어디 녀려야 밀름도야 또 데네게 통요요 말해서 밀름도 마미나스.
The meaning then is stated here. If one has not given rise for one's to the determination for oneself to gain freedom from suffering, how could it be said that one would have gained such an aspiration for others? One wouldn't have even dreamt of such a thing if one hadn't given rise to the wish for oneself to gain freedom of suffering.
지사 랑기 된도 디레스면 소수기 개변이 된다야 디네 삼스 땅요 말에 밀람나야 통요 말에 모수 통야데 파시 밀람나 통요 말에 그래서 다가 셴리 펜버 주에게 셴리 로제게 삼스 땅요도 딜 삼다다 니요로 와줄래 콜로 로보 제베나 나라는 캡산 디라게 했습니다. 디 소수기 된다라 셴리 로제 바체거로 와 근데 이 콜리아 로봇이 되는 제베나 말을 제부도 개반 디라게 했습니다. 그 랑기 돈달라 셴레 펜버두야 샤거로. 디나신 제사 랑기 개반 돈달랑 디기 두야다 동아세 돈달레 셴리 셴심제 탐제레 펜버두 셴심제 동아세 디기 두고도 셈베 삼로지 랑기 돈아야 되는 삼로 콜 뇨요 말했을 때니 고거 말 밀람나야 되네 통요 말해서 그러다.
The usual way in the world is that when help is given to others, there is an expectation to receive some kind of benefit for oneself. It's very seldom is help or assistance given completely freely. One usually expects some form of at least gratitude to be expressed. So here, if one hasn't even given rise to such a wish for oneself to gain a benefit, how can one really have given rise to a wish to help others?
지사다 리지간저기 지네 셴리 로체바들이야 소수기 개반 균에 삼마나지 셴 강아 통여도 될이야 강아세 로체 중국으로 빼는 거는 주 대사 디네가 강아 치료갑이야 안지그 칼라다 디네기 둘로다 지 로겹제의 용거로 지서 소수기 개반되나 삼마나마지 디 용거로 와 제사 당아주기 셴심제 탐지를 디기루요 동화세 삼다나 될이야 다셴 랑기 돈다 균에 상면 마다제 랑돈 균에 매바제 셴심제 코나라 삼다 심제 디기루비도 동화세 오도 제사 셴심제를 펜바두고 셴심제 탐지기 돈다래 펜바두에 돈다라 내상 요거가 토부도 셈베 삼도 예디다 다셴이 돈도로 봐 제사 랑기 돈도 되네 삼 랑기 개방이 돈다라 삼로 삼보 되네지 모수기에데 매 밀람도 통면나 안에 통면에다 셴심제 탐지 되네게 통면에 다 셴심제 탐지 랑둔 균에 매바 셴심제 코나를 펜비게 삼로 안에 잠니제다 자유sem디 간스키리 스키야요 말해서 그러다.
And there certainly are, though, those who do help in the world without any self-interest. And that is ideally what we should be striving to engage in, not wanting to gain recognition or reputation or even thanks, but helping because it is the right thing to do. This is the way to help. But in order to give rise to this strength of mind, to help others, to help them no matter the hardship and difficulty, oneself has had to have given rise already to a wish for oneself to gain freedom from suffering.
지사도나 가상 주변에 이제 지당 소소랑 Masungu Dunga, Korea Dunga, Tadal Nyomo Beleda, Nyomo Gewa Dele, Targudu, De Dunga, the Seo Sembic, Sosolia, some of the Nishmena, and the Sosogi, Shen you don't Shen Dunga, the Seo Digitu Sembe, some of the young couple was. Chizatango, Soso Rangi, Dunga Digi, Ganga Digi, Tonja, did Ganga the Seo Sembe, some Logitung, the nigger some of Yahoo di, and the Shanleba. Mipa Burge Shan some down you took mother Rangi and Sosorana, Korea Dunga, Taba Tobu to Sempic, Sosorana, Korea Dunga, Yomo Bangaje, and Sanjoko Tobu to Sembe, some of Mena, Shan, Sanjoko, like Gigin Sibe, some of the two marriages over that.
Here, the approach that one necessarily must take is one needs to come to understand what suffering is, so the subtler levels, and how it comes about. And to understand that, one needs to look at one's own lived experience, because this is what one can perceive more clearly, come to understand the subtler ways that oneself suffers and the reasons why. Through that understanding, then one will give rise to a determination, I want to be free of this. That then is the basis to generate actual love and compassion, wanting others to be freed of the same sufferings and its causes that you have recognized torment you so. So it's imperative to start with oneself, to see the way that suffering comes about within oneself, and give rise to the determination, I want this to come to an end. Only then can one have such a wish for others, because only then one has understood the process by which suffering comes about. Then Lama Tsongkhapa continues. Therefore, in the training of persons of lesser capacity, you contemplate how the harm of suffering of the lower realms befalls you, and in the training of persons of medium capacity, you contemplate how even in the higher rebirths there is suffering and no peace or happiness.
Jamni da Shenlia, Dunga, Jadu, and Digi, some Yahuchi Kevala, Jamni Kevala, and the Rangi Dendo, and the Deniga some to Yahuchimena, Kitu Mares and Larvada, and Deniga Kitu Mena, and the Nambo and the Karachanguras and the Lochandu Karachanguras and the Kiwichun Kapsu and the Sosugi, and Soso Rang Tendo, and Dunga of some Tango, the Essage. Deniza, the said, Gimsentici, the Genius, she had this word.
The first word here, therefore, the use of the word therefore shows that a link to what's been presented above. It shows a reasoning. And this is that in order to generate bodhicitta, because one has reflected on the benefits of bodhicitta, so in order to generate bodhicitta, one needs to generate love and compassion. But love and compassion for all beings can only come about in dependence on one having recognized one's own situation first, both in terms of the suffering of the high realms, but also the potential suffering of the lower realms. So therefore, this term therefore links to what's been presented above.
Rangla nga sungu dunga yu neba babsu di samtangu de ese da rangla samtangu de ese da nga zu da nga zu giwu chungu tuma lami samta de kasang shuba na yire neba babsu samtang da da nga semja je gnye le nga zu jang yu sim ye panyue tong jang yu sim ye and jige panyue da de ne tong da jang yu sim nyam le je gu semja tam ju sang yu gu mo to wo me jang yu sim nyam le ji yin sem be sam ko ne da ji je bala and na wo de jezada mutuche gewachima ngaso da nyawa da denike be ida da dundola sobakena ganga deni yore said ni sutige hago bache da hago chin deni is hago ne da rangla babsu samta de dinga ane nyawala kesona and 로디기스라 강아 동아 대신 용고래 제가 되는 용 맞아 디데 된델이야 안 동아 용고 맞아 된델이야 안에 최제바다 최제벽고 개와서요고 윤회라고 말이야 삼다야다 안디나시 다 이다를 깨봐다 둔조를 깨봐이나다 등하대 깨서봐이나 나지 수기 동아 용 강아 용고야 돼 동아 용고 이 말에 안디가라 아니 개위 자와 사야메바다 디버샤야메고 고함메바 되는 자주셈 냠내지야다 지금 사유고 봐 토토야래 갈래하고 차사래 삼지 데니게 삼다네 안 가르쳐서네 다 델레 깨와치마 델레 마깨와치 원도고 봐도 토바제고도 선배게 도전의 삼당고 그래지 지나 랑라 데니 유네고 밥수세 랑니디 깨와이나 로디게스티 야와도 그래 데네 동아뇽 데네 기회 자와 두비게 뭐고합이와 말에 선배다 뇌바이다 강아디게 도전의 삼다제 야 데인자다 깨와치마다 마솔 마깨와디 제고 원도고 봐 토바제고도 데네 삼다 토바 제고도 삼녀도 데네 원도고 봐 토바라 아니 냠나 가르쳐서네 데네 짐바다에 가서 수림 소야다 서버콤이야 아니 전주 좀야라 소바다 아니 지금만 답이야라 소바 루시네 냠나 제고를 해야지 나 기부 중요한 값소 삼다다 두스당고 그래야지
The text continues, therefore, in the training of persons of lesser capacity. So here we then can repeat some of what we looked at last night, in that one has been reflecting on the benefits of bodhicitta to the extent where one has given rise to the determination to become a bodhisattva oneself, to generate bodhicitta within. But in order to do so, and this then is a link to the trainings of a practitioner of initial capacity, is that in order to become a bodhisattva, I need to cultivate the relevant causes, and this will take extensive effort over a protracted period of time. I have to thereby ensure that for lifetime after lifetime, I continue to attain rebirths in the higher states. I must continue to gain rebirths as a human or god, and with the favorable circumstances that are required to continue my process of spiritual development. I cannot risk falling into the low realms, because if I fall into the lower realms, I will suffer in so many ways, and one here can then reflect on the sufferings of animals, the spirits of hell beings, giving rise to the determination, I do not want to suffer in that way, and moreover, because of the strength of my suffering, I'll be so dominated by pain and misery, I will not be able to cultivate virtue. I will not be able to progress towards generating my goal of bodhicitta. Moreover, I may well gain a rebirth in the lower realms where my mental capacity is greatly impeded. I don't have the mental capacity to cultivate virtue. Moreover, so thirdly, not only will I suffer, not only will I have limited capacity, but thirdly, if I take rebirth in the lower realms, I will not have access to the Dharma. So for these reasons, the intensity of the suffering, my limited capacity, as well as not having access to the Dharma, if I fall into the lower realms, I will not be able to continue my spiritual journey, progressing towards the attainment of liberation, towards the attainment of bodhicitta. Therefore, I must ensure I gain further excellent rebirths, and I must cultivate those causes. And thereby, one comes to the trainings of a practitioner of initial capacity. When the trainings are in brief, I will not harm, but I will strive to benefit. And the way this is usually presented is training in ethical restraint of abandoning harm through one's physical behavior and speech, as well as bringing benefit through generosity, as well as engaging in cultivating patience, joyous perseverance, and making prayer. So in this way, one engages in the trainings shared with a practitioner of initial capacity.
강아 된데 중앙 디강라 나타나 미고마 토바네 된데리아 동화세 소수기 딩 동화세 투야 대기 주비야 탈번 요래 안샤리아 판도 주비야게 제 투야 요래 안디는 딩아주기 지기 람냠네 자주셈 콤바다 동반요 코미라 소바 차서 디네 된데로 콤메고 고합 요래 콤 투고 요래 세지 누시에 손어도 제상하는 들려 담갈 마소나 사질 마소나 카니 조서의 카니시 파셰 시에도 제자디 결혼 될 조변에 강아된데들이요 디디요래 경디디디라기요래서 될 로변에 결혼 디강아 디기디요래 니 캡사된데들 주요요래서 시에도 제자당아도 디 담가제 고급라고 그러고 제자 니네스도 하 먹어나 담가제 고급라고 말고 제자 니네스 하 고여도 데니기 니스도 냐와다 이다다 둔돌라서 두수 요래서 델레되다 하다 밀라서 바디네 요래서 두신의 송요도 제자다 아는가 개와치말 하다 미고와 도보시도 우스 자 지토에게 된다라는 유가르사 그랬으면 대시슈야 되게 주름다 주름소야들라서 바 두시오래서 두신의 냠내지가 고급지 두삼단제 아는 원료고바 토야게 돈여기 둔바디 개와데 두스기 오고래 해지르와다
So in meditation, then the way to approach this is to recognize that right now we are, in a sense, at a fork in the road. We can either engage in thinking about the various potential rebirths that lie before us and the consequences of such rebirths, or we can just continue to let things play out and see what happens. So we can either actively influence our future rebirths, or we can continue just to live in distraction. Here then, in the meditation, thinking in this way, we then think about the potential rebirths and the sufferings that will befall one or the sufferings one will encounter if one falls into the lower realms, as well as one's restricted capacity, as well as our lack of opportunity to engage in the Dharma. So these are three groups of characteristics that await us at whichever rebirth follows. And we can very clearly then see that to attain rebirth in the higher states, this is clearly preferable. It will not only mean we will suffer far less, our manifest suffering will be far less intense, but we will have the capacity to engage in the Dharma. And thirdly, we will have access to spiritual teachers and spiritual training. So recognizing then the preference for, or the preferential rebirths, we then commit to creating those causes, training our mind in ethics, in generosity, patience, joyous perseverance, as well as making prayer.
지난달에 저 지소를 다가로와 변화가 저기 내가 저기 기합 현다질래야 조고에네 지난달에 기합 현다신의 디기 안 될래야 안 지게 내가 튀긴 가야 야가도 가리나 야가도 될 기합 될로나 안 강아디네 요를 내가 라카를 강아디는 요를 지 강아디게 세야다 지 될이 강아디게 강아 춘춘 안니가 튀긴 주야 되게 야고 요베네 딩이다 하고 베네 아는 결혼 가와도 가서 야가데 주기서 담가 주고와 맞아 인가도 해도 주금에 야가도 줘야기 탑시시고 선배다 디루 야가도 줘야기 탑람 가르가르 고고에 베스치기로와 어디 나신 다 직바 우차고로와 데네 하 먹어봤나 직조걸 아다 직조셔서 나모는 데네 강아유스 테서 랩선에 데네 경시우라고로와 제가 데네기 조선이데 야고하고 봤나 야도 디야 야도 하고 봤나 데네 어디 유아데 존데 강아지네 체다 데네 지가 빼 강아지 데데 죽음에서 데 야가도 줘야기 탑리디 탑시디 베스치기로와 이제 어디 나신 당아도 당보 대등한 줄에 라와 유비 고급 유비 갑라 안 두시네 니스도 하고 봤지 내 야가들 줘야 삼당으로 근데다 이 고급 메디다 줘야기 괜찮으면서나 남주나는 가와존을 남주나 주사나 다들 말해봐도 줘 얼마도 니네 담가서 가요 말하다 어디 나신 아주 희야고 고소스나 네 담가 가요 말고 가와존나 줘야로와 지자데 다들 라와 유비 마시비 갑래야 니스티기 두시네 야도 니디 야와하고 봤지 디는 소소 담가지 야가도 줘야기 탑람디 두고 그래서 된다 디스모로 와.
This procedure is something that you probably have all employed in your own lives. You've been at a point of decision where you can choose to either continue as you are or to change the trajectory of your life. And this may entail, should I take a new job or not? Should I move city or not? Should I move country or not? And whatever the situation may be, you will go through the same thought process as just presented. You'll weigh up the pros and the cons of either option and think, well, if I continue as I am now, then this is what I expect to continue to happen. Or if I make these changes, then I can expect this to follow. And in this way, one weighs up the pros and the cons and then makes a decision. I'm either going to continue as things are, or I'm going to make a change. And if one is faced with such an opportunity, but decides, or rather, if one is faced with such an opportunity, but doesn't put any thought into it, and just lets that opportunity go to waste, in all likelihood, some years later, you'll reflect back at that point in your life when you could have changed its trajectory, but you missed that opportunity. You didn't put any thought into it, and now it's past. On the other hand, if when faced with such an opportunity, one does think well, then one is likely to come to the right decision and will engage in the various causes that are required to bring about the goal that you want to achieve. And then later, when one looks back, one will be able to recognize, I thought about it well, and I made the right decision. So this is something that probably at several instances in your own life, you've engaged in such a process. And that's the same process here in terms of determining to utilize this opportunity that one has now, where one has access to knowledge and has the mental capacity to think and make decisions, and thereby to utilize this opportunity well, so that later, when this life comes to an end, there's no regret about how one has lived this final period of life.
Bendigo samdane deni dustina samdan dustin lo jango resen ane deni chansan dane ngondio gobang tobsen den digor besidu dian digo mares dile ya yores urda ni ngondio gobang toban rada mi gobang tobane gangayo de dingi kapso torina ya dunga shin chidi meso samgo gurelawa dela samdan de garetang de jinyele deni ki chungyo kap samda di samdan also chik Dösi some Osiali, dinner and the Garshorson, Dilla. What I want to go out to had a milk given do about me by your was is that milk given a as a name, Yore, and she gave Joshi Tubi, Doja Ganga, Yore, and the Chirangu Dunda, Madubi Ganga, and the Sosu Dunda doing a departure, I guess sometimes Ganga, and she Martu Ganga, just the Negi, a millionaire Ganga Mangodus, Jezada Chita Milia, Dunga, Nandru Dunga, touch in the Nandul Jeban Milia Tiki Ya Yore, Tungasia, Tablum Yore, the Inea, that Ganga Mangu, Suzuki, Denigi Tone Gangari, and Chenyam Jebala and Parche Mangu, Gabriel Tungi, Madame Ganga, Gabrielia, and Yugi Martu Ganga, Yamlenja, Koka Marava, and Deniji go up to Dinitua, Sempeda, Dangan Milikevene Dungatus. That didn't that Halekevene, Halene, that you go, Hale. Benang to get Debiel Hada Su Gilada Sumil Hasia, your water, do something that Sugilala, and the Debiel Halakebene, Debiel Hala, Martoja, Corolaya, Tubuja, Nenazayo Manguru, the Ganga, Rangit, and Majuba Ganga, Ganga Minashin Chipareshas, you do. That's Sulia, Sudan, Sumila, some Davina, Manzi, Denigi, and the Minashi doing a meba in that chick. Chain Yamnetia, Coca Maraval had Sering Bola Sovakiana, and the chain Yampin Sumela Sovakiana, chain Yakopini Medican, and do sin it, Ganga do us and big Tinigida, young Tinish do, and big some title, or that Tini, Dele Tarchin, Tarba said the Togu, Jeza, this Chazan Garchin Ligors and the Ganga de Yon, Debalakeva and other, Halakeva in other, Chizan Leda, Yomo, Legi, Ongi, Yomo, Ongeta, Halakeva and Milkeva and the Ganga de la Tayaminu, Chizakanga Yu Beresha. That Ganga Dele, the Mayon de Carson, 레다 뇽모 오게와들 탈고도 선배게 삼로 치려고 장고를 해지래 레다 뇽모 온게 당하랑 레다 뇽모 온게 때와 치마 나 레다 뇽모 온게 게 먹어봐지 제고도 제산디 데네게 디주 탈바도는 일 와서 탈바도는 이제 탈바도는 일 와서 레다 뇽모 오게와들 탈고도 선배게 내 탈고도 선배 삼로시 디 탈고도 선배 삼도 장유다 디 탈에게 탑람 가르쳐고 그랬으네 대징한도 시 추림다 진바 쇠발라서 여바체 디간라 다 조고 뇽모바 레다 뇽모비 뇽보디 가르스 뇽모바 디게 되자 공정하자 디야 다스 말해바디 제자데 뇽보디 레다 뇽모비 깨월레 탈고 봐서 레다 뇽모바데 빵고고 디메바 쇠고래 디메바 쇠바디다 다메바도 베시라 꼼제 뇽보텐제 디메바 쇠고도 제자 디네자다 이 다메도 베시라 냠수고 다메데 하고 또네 디곰제네 띵에전 곰베 또기 디냠수 렌쟁에 뇽모바 가서 뇽모 온게 깨와들라 타르바 지기 인생비게 누스는 삼당고 고리 당고래 지기 우징기 값수다
Kan det mange luk med bag?
네 동아래 딘메 시리메서 삼수세데 다 시리메서 삼수듯이 두르와다
Reflecting in that way, then, one continues one's reflection, asking oneself the rhetorical question, whilst it is imperative I ensure a good rebirth in my future lives. Is that the very best that can be attained? Is that the very best that someone of my capacity actually can achieve? A person with a fully qualified precious human rebirth is merely another good rebirth, the best that I can attain. Because the reality, as we know from our own lived experience, the human realm is still beset by intense suffering. Suffering from a wide variety of causes, from conflict within the home, conflict within between communities or between nations, the sufferings relating to aging, relating to illness, the ongoing mental sufferings, the frustrations and annoyances that come from things not going our way or for striving to achieve something but not being able to. So many problems, so many difficulties. And even if one attains a higher rebirth than in the human realms, let's say a desire realm God, one still doesn't escape from conflicts such as warfare. And whilst there are higher God realms to be born in, as in the formal and formless realms, one is still not free. So in this way, one lifts one's, or takes one's meditation deeper. Firstly, having brought about the determination to attain an excellent rebirth and to accumulate those causes. Now recognizing, whilst one needs to attain good rebirths, that cannot be our final goal. We need to gain freedom from being born in cyclic existence. Because as long as we remain in the position that we are right now, within this prison of samsara, this prison of our own making, we will suffer. This prison that we are bound in is constructed by our own contaminated karma, and is accumulated by our own afflictions. And those afflictions all have as their root cause the ignorance on our continuum, the ignorance of self-grasping. In this way we reflect how we perpetuate our own cycling our own circling in cyclic existence, our own construction of our own individual prison of samsara. In this way, we give rise to a disenchantment for being bound within this prison and give rise to a wish for freedom. And this freedom can be attained by continuing to accumulate those same four causes that lead to good rebirths, but also developing wisdom. The wisdom understanding reality, the wisdom realizing emptiness. This wisdom is the antidote to the very root cause of our suffering. And for that wisdom to have sufficient strength to actually cut the ignorance of self-grasping, it needs to be held by a powerful, concentrated mind. So therefore, in addition to those 4 causes of ethics, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance, we need to cultivate wisdom and concentration. So in this way, we take our meditation to an even more profound level.
ngarang kanga na le hyche kanang kibu meba ngarang kanga na lungde bane ni kana kshana la kana rogo chi tu re chesa di rogo chi tu ya ra gi midwa tu midwa nge semja thamji gi dönje tu sa marwa chesa deni jang nge semja thamji gi dön je ba she ba la rang ge jele pemba yo du semja thamji gi dön shen semja la pemba tu ba la ngarang kanga me kanga de se wo do nga kara me ba ka de chine shen ya pemba kana tu mina tu tu ye kanga me na nge je tu ro ba chesa da deni ko ngonde ko ke thoba ina yang nyomong pa le da nyomo ke wa thile matha pa ina da nga dunga ara le dunga pa to shan dunga da ma ra ya da ani shidi me ba rang le den dunga da shidi me du shan le ro che ka le kha bo le she je shan sim je le phan ba tu sa ma de din jang e semja thamje le phan ba tu ba la ya ngarang khurwi le da nyomo wa ke wa thile de thar ko du sembi samda de jisa deni ki 기부 진다 투모에 삼바 장비 갑래야 고 가스네 셈젤에 판박에 잠니지기 삼로 고 미유샤 네 셈제 탐주 상요고 봐 특别치도 미유도 디통 샤베 토네 두 삼다데 기부 진다 투모에 삼라 장바세 제자디네 삼라 장비 갑래야 랑라 동아 유주 시디 메주 삼다 랑이 동아 여바데 시디 여바 시디 메바이네 시한리야 판도 죽투에게 개치모지 두 메바 근데 장슈셈 냠len je an sa yo ko ba top tu me ba du gyong de ne ra gyo ba du se ne sam da yu da de ne gi bu chen da tu mo we sam ba jang ba se du se ne jang go go le se gi bu chen gi tu mo sam be jang be ka bla je da shi di me su je di she ro ngi de ji de je sa to ri se da ha da mi go ba to ne ro ba allez, di donda di ngan de jishe de dishe ver dal.
The reflection that you're going through now first started with the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, and now one has moved into the training shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. So as the translator, I can't remember if I read this second clause, but from the sentence, I'll read it now, in case I didn't earlier. And in the trainings of persons of medium capacity, you contemplate how even in higher rebirths, there is suffering and no peace or happiness. Here, one is very aware from one's own lived experience that as one is right now, one has not attained a state of inner peace, but continues to have suffering experience upon suffering experience before one. And that this is a process over which one has no control. Recognizing the helplessness of our situation, that problems and difficulties befall us, and that we are helpless to skillfully prevent them, we come to recognize that as long as I am in this very ordinary state, how can I actually develop love and compassion for others? As long as I continue to suffer, in particular, as long as I am overwhelmed by my afflictions and thereby overwhelmed by self-interest, how can I truly have an attitude of sincere love and compassion for others? Here then, the determination that is conjoined with practice or shared with practitioners of intermediate capacity arises strongly within one's mind. I have to gain some control over this afflicted mind of mine. I need to make progress in the abandoning of my afflictions so that whilst I'm still an ordinary being, I am less deluded, less deceived by these afflictions, and thereby have more mental space, more mental capacity to develop actual love and compassion. So here one is engaging in the training shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity, whereby one is recognizing that the root of our suffering is ignorance, and from the ignorance all our afflictions, and from the afflictions our contaminated karma. And one has recognized that because I am controlled by these afflictions, my capacity to develop an other-focused attitude is severely impeded. I need to gain freedom from the self-created prison of my own afflictions.
Gewa tuya meba, gogab meba di dushine samtane nga dele keba nita ganga yonsa chesan dele tawu sembeki ganga dele tawu sembe samaki yada. An dene ba lo jang che an ya tu de o ngondio goba hada mi goba thoba ine ya ganga dungwa dene du chesada sosole shidi menu chesada ngash kowe dene dunga dele de matar tab menu sembeki chesa dunga di dele de tawu sembe samloji sosolya dene ge ganga dele tawu sembe samlo shushimboji yago ledu an dene 다 데네 아니 지구서 데네 아니 가르쳐 셈제 탐지 삼당 예세네 데네 인도 규비 셈제 남라 양 랑냠라 빠네 곰베 잠바다 이제 계위 규르규르신 데레 장슈 셈계위 아니 중징당 투모위 삼바 종아니 장슈 셈 쩨마마인베 계비게 탑이노스
So here in the meditation, we first start with the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, where we reflect how, again, this is in the envelope of wanting to develop bodhicitta. So this is this wish to develop bodhicitta holding the entirety of the meditation, even though it's not now at this point explicit. So one now engages within this context of wanting to generate bodhicitta, in the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, thinking, if I fall to the lower realms, I will not be able to continue my process of spiritual development and generate bodhicitta and become a bodhisattva because of the intensity of the suffering I will experience in the lower realms, because of my greatly limited capacity, either due to the intensity of the suffering or the rebirth that I am in, and then thirdly, that I will not have access to the Dharma and thereby not have access to spiritually develop. So I have to ensure I gain freedom from rebirth in the lower realms. Then one progresses to the training shared of a practitioner of intermediate capacity. But if I remain as I am now, bound within in samsara, even though I have a rebirth in the higher realms, but I remain controlled by my afflictions, tossed around in the ocean of suffering, tormented by three types of suffering, and having these afflictions continuously disrupt any cultivation of bodhicitta, I have to gain freedom from this. Because the position I am in right now is I struggle to develop sincere love and compassion. I have to gain freedom from being bound in samsara, freedom from these afflictions. So this is then the link, how one moves into the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity and then progresses onwards. And now the text continues. Then, drawing on your own experience, you contemplate how this applies to sentient beings who have become dear to you. Meditating in this way becomes a cause for love and compassion to arise, from which bodhicitta is born. Therefore, training in the contemplation shared with persons of lesser and medium capacity is a means of generating uncontrived bodhicitta.
데니기 삼로데 소소랑 타고도 셈비게도 김체로다 타고비 김체 안 지강아 유비 김체 약고 하고 요도 안 지금 데니게 삼로데 템부실이요 안다 미버디 바 제버 잡지 대시 소소라 삼바다 바 젠레야 삼다지 제자다 라니 지고스 내가 지그레 셈전 탐지 셈전 세대 셴 빠도 매바래 제자 셈전 탐지 나 나신 대화 거버도 지버러 와 동아 미도바 지버러 와서 제자 나랑 나손을 깨봐이나 강아지는 용어받아 아니 지게 개위 냠는 제모 경태는 라기도 와 진짜 셈전 탐지 나손을 깨봐이나 직바로 혼조에 강한 용고래 제상 혼조를 냠는 제고 고합 라기오 말와서 안디 나시 셈전 나랑 코위에 동아를 가서 레다 녀모 원기 하다 미고바 토바야 땡델이야 동아여 받아 아니 지게 강아 여바지 지여바이네 동안 용고에네 셈전 탐지 안 레다 녀모 코와래 하다 미고바 토바이네 혼자에다 동안 용고바다 직부직이야래 제사다 쳔아라 랑다 셴 강에 케미도 진짜 매와자 셈전 탐지 아니 동안 디기 고도 셈전 탐지에다 나손을 깨바이네 혼술을 강아도 공화 강아도 나원저 고방 토발 하다 미 고방 토바이네 레다 녀모 뭔가 하다 미 고방을 깨워 렘바이네 안스 샤네 강아디니 도아스 디네자다 셈젠 가니시네 창마 아니 지 대게다 중국 디기 고도스 랑을 고바나 지 혼자 디기 고도스 대자 샬레 셈제 탐제 랑 동아다 미디오바 나신 혼자 동아디다나 자고도 와스 셈제 탐제 나소 동아다 자고도 아니 원디 가서 코에 레다 녀몽이 코에 동아들 자고도 셈비게 두스 삼다이도 지다 셈젤 미베 잠바데 니지 공고래 지다디 디 공미도 대시 랑을 빠쁘게 다쭉 데네께와나 강아디네 여러 용디네 자거서 세부니서 하고 봐서 디 냠용스 냠 데네게 냠용디 레어도 난 샬 파티도 직부직이야 임바데 세부슈 하고 통그래지 제가 디네 공부여도 안 잠니지 끼에게 규체고래 제가 되네 검진에 공고고래 제가 되네기 지상 기부 중우당 징기 값소 소수기 소소라 삼다 강아 유스 삼다도 뭐 하고도 니기 안미바데 셈전 탐질을 보여시 삼다샤베 있네 되네 잠니지 끼에 라용고래 제가 잠니지 기부 규체고래 제가 되네기 검내 잠바데 인식 기부 규규와래
Looking at that first sentence, then drawing on your own experience. So your own experience, this means that thus far, when engaging in the two sets of meditations that are shared with practitioners of initial and intermediate capacity, one should be looking at it from your own perspective. How would it be if I fell in the low realms and I was suffering there, and what that would mean in terms of my own spiritual development? And then secondly, how it is for me right now or throughout this life of being tormented, even though I'm born in the higher realms, tormented by my own afflictions and thereby suffering. So the focus has been on oneself. Now one lifts one's gaze to others, but one has as one's basis one's own experience. So again from the text, then drawing on your own experience, you contemplate how this applies to sentient beings who have become dear to you. Now our focus shifts from ourselves to others. This is how we enter into the trainings of the practitioner of great capacity, where we recognize that at a fundamental level, myself and others are no different. All differences that I perceive are superficial. At a fundamental level, we all want to be happy. No one wants to suffer. The only area I can actually point to a difference is to say that I'm only one, but others are limitless, uncountable in number. So therefore, I have to help them, because we are in the same predicament. On one hand, yearning for happiness, but on the other, still have sufferings and problems befall us continuously. In the same way that I, as an ordinary being, face the potential of falling into the lower realms in my next rebirth, This is the case for all other ordinary beings too. And in the same way that I am tormented by my own afflictions, this is also the case for all others. In the same way that because of being tormented by the afflictions, I've made so many wrong decisions, thinking that it would lead to happiness, but it just led to further suffering. So too for others. And in the same way that I now have gained some knowledge of my potential to gain freedom, may all others gain this knowledge and skill too, and gain freedom from suffering. This is the mind of compassion. And in the same way I yearned for lasting happiness, may all beings achieve a state of lasting happiness. This is the mind of love. So what we have done is through initially reflecting on our own situation, both in terms of the trainings of a practitioner of initial and intermediate capacity, only then do we focus on others, giving rise to sincere love and compassion. If one trains in this way, the generation of actual love and compassion comes about quite easily, but it will only come about in a genuine manner and easily if one has trained well in those preliminaries, in the training shared with the practitioner of initial and intermediate capacity.
Yesa dinige komnyene jambada shenle michene jitiki koda dunga jabo tsibe nichi komyodu deda dinige komnije geyoda ane karchi grisene da dinige shen semjan dunga jagodu sembegi da sosulya semshul maslon be jikshi leodu da sam gardan grisene da kanis jagore sa yorba da konso dunga le kanis jagore konso dege kanis tubore sembe yorba yesa dininde 디 제래 만족에 디 간지 두고르시도 다 대신 안저 소소한 삼 따야 돼. 나원도 고바 나송의 등을 타죠. 원도 고바 토발라 규수름 소야다. 아니 진바 추르서 전주디게 냠는 제고를 해야지. 네 컨트롤에 땡고 그래서 남된제 나랑 냠는 제와 나시 컨트롤에 디 남된제 그래서 제가 콜베 등을 줘야지. 아니 타르바스 가서 콜베 등을 탈비게 레다 녀모ong에 탈베 탈바디 타바 토발라 안데지 소소라랑에 가르sam당레스네 진바다 추준서버 준례님 디가라 다음에 보토비 시라님 술렘발레 때는 코에 동안에 고녀모 바세 타바 토고레 세비게 탑람디 소소게 삼다샤 요르바 어디 디 나랑은 냠네 제고바 나싱이 다섬전 탐젤이야 추름기 냠네 제다다 진베 냠네 쇠베 냠네 제다 진짜 녀모베 니보 다음에 바 땡제 콘술레 냠술 렌주제 아니 거기 야상 예설이야 꾸긴 거기 동안에 타바 지긴 세비게 나도 삼로치 되니 코고로 봐. 제가 샘전 던져 거기 동안에 자고도 샘베게도 다 간스 자그레 라비도 대신하랑 냠는 제 자탕에 냠는 제다 나신지 이 콘솔레 파티엔제 콘솔레 냠술 렌주제 되네 고발이 줘봐 지긴 사지. 또 샘든 라산 남다세 디용으로 와대. Laksam namda seurwa. Jam nije laksan namda. Jisdina jambada nichimba laksan namda ji günde menga dünna da jam nije laksan namda ki orwa dis. Jesa laksan namda se di seurwa da.
And in this meditation, when the wish arises to help others, naturally one will know what it is that others need because of the thought process that you have gone through. You'll know that others would appreciate any assistance one gives, such as material or giving friendship and so forth. But what others really yearn for is the same as you. Because you've recognized we are no different on a fundamental level. We all want to abide happily, with the mind at peace, never experiencing suffering. And to attain this, particular causes need to be cultivated, so that others are no different from myself. Therefore, what they need from me is guidance in how to cultivate the causes that lead to good rebirths, so that those who right now are not tormented in the lower realms, I can help them to cultivate the causes that will lead to further good rebirths. This is what others need from me, and this is what I will give them. Guidance in how to live ethically, how to have a generous attitude, how to be patient in the face of adversity, and how to take delight in virtue. I will help others in this way. And where they are receptive to, I will help them identify the causes of their suffering and the antidote to that. In other words, how to cultivate wisdom and even concentration to give that wisdom the strength required. This is what others really need from me. And this is the generation of wholehearted resolve, or the altruistic attitude. Here we come to recognize that all the training that I am engaging in, though from ethics up to wisdom, I'm not just doing for myself. It's so that I have ever more skill in being able to help others, that I can help others based on my own experience.
Those sometimes 당에 전에 된제 냠술련 주제 내가 상이 semjan 담지 상에서 꾸기 셈베 삼례어도 나데네 나야 양게 삼다도 오다 데네기 된 투에기 다등아 셈전제 감나 매바 나서 봐래 제가 가실래 다음에 봐시나가 지티바 가시 마디바 용고 제가다 간에 때네 야가 요리 뒤수기디 때네 야가 감나 매바도 튕비기 지다와 신도파 된 고고래 제가 컨트롤에 감 누지 감나 매바지 캠바 아니 데네기 감나 캠비토네 댄싱바디 데네기 댄싱바디다 상요 코나레스 제가 상기기 상계를 하고지 매래 진짜 상계의 현을 최된발라 아니 수수용의 균 탐제단 자와 현일의 댐비게 아니 지니수 탐제 차상 캠바지 차고를 진짜 탐제 캠바래 저균 탐제단 자와 아니 현기 니수 니룩 탐제 캠바래 진짜 다 상계 현의 편도 주에 탈로描述的 상계의 디인장의 심제 탐제에 두나 상유고마 토바 지인습에 전시습니다 기기를 해제되나
With this deep determination whereby one takes responsibility for the welfare of others, one recognizes, though, the tremendous limitation one has right now, in that there's such variety in terms of personalities in our world, people with their own individual karmic backgrounds and individual spiritual dispositions. It's difficult to know how to guide them, how to interact with others in a way that they would be most receptive to. We know from our own experience how easy it is to, with a good intention, to reach out with a hand of assistance, but others may well get annoyed or frustrated with us. So needing to spiritually develop so that we can help others ever more, so that we can help others in accordance with their own disposition and inclination. We develop the determination, I have to become a Buddha, the most skilled of guides. And here, one generates bodhicitta, the determination to guide others to a state freed of suffering. And to do so, I have to myself become the most skilled of guides, a Buddha.
예산 델레 장주 심기회 승도와 지산 델레 장주 심기회 잠니제곰 장주니제곰 데네 하섬 게바 델레 네 장주 심기고레세 이거로 와서 대시 심바두신 대시 셰바나 대시 데네 인자다 지산 충리다 투모웨 삼바 종아니 시도 지산 기부 충우다 투모웨 삼바 종아다 진다 삼바 종아디 지사 기부 침비게다 장주 안디 대 삼바 종아라 데네 네 잠니제기 데네 하섬게 데자 장주심 장주스 주마메 기비게 탑야고레스 탑들이에서 다 기부 충우다 투모웨 남자야다 기부 준다 투모웨 남자야디 장주심 주마메바 장주스 문네디 주마메바 문네디 기에게 다 탑리에스
And this Lama Tsongkhapa presents in the sentence, meditating in this way becomes the cause for love and compassion to arise, from which bodhicitta is born. So therefore one recognizes through this presentation that to generate bodhicitta ourselves, to be counted amongst the children of the Buddha, and thereby to receive all the benefits of bodhicitta, requires training in a specific way. Lama Tsongkhapa continues, therefore, training in the contemplations shared with persons of lesser and medium capacity is the means of generating uncontrived bodhicitta.
오도시네 단 람림나 소야게 제자 냠랭이 림바데 당보 기부 총나 투모와 람미림발라 로장 데네 기부 진다 투모와 람미림발 로장 데네 로야고 창에도 내 디미바디 파 뿌여시甚至 탐절 파삼다 데네 잡아고 니죠고 늘 하삼게 루치네 자주심기리 에세당은 저기 람냠랭이 데데 람림과 소야게 람냠랭이 림바 태바침별이야 람냠랭이 림바디게 누스치는 송거로 와다 도나디레.
Hopefully now it is very clear why in the Lamrim it starts with the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, which is the very foundation upon which we then are ready to successfully engage in the trainings shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. And with that foundation established completely, one will be successful in one's trainings of a practitioner of great capacity.
나는 저기 나 태화침비 취념는 제발라 다 인지 미지대 기부 중에 람미림바 랍기부 진다 람밀라치 드니 림바 인지 미지 제고 레베서 지한직 삼나리로 하다 당보고는 태화침비 취 잠니지 롭전 제산 지기로 하다 기부 중을 중에서 진섬도 뒤에 마부 고야서 당보고는 기부 챔비기 태화침비 람밀 롭전 제산 지기로 와서 제 드니게 삼주 연구로 하다.
So for those who have the wish to enter into the grounds of the Bodhisattva, or the paths of the Bodhisattva, and engage thereby or therefore in the trainings which are unique to practitioners of great capacity, they may well think to themselves, do I really need to put time and energy into the trainings of a practitioner of initial and intermediate capacity? Because I can see that's going to take a lot of time and energy, but what I really want is to meditate on bodhicitta, on emptiness.
또 디웨딜레 아버네 인지 민지당은 저기 최냠len지디 타바침비 최냠len지디 기부 총어다 투모알람이 징게 람지림바데 세델이야 녀리야 롭종제디네 인지 민지 림바데 조고야 녀바요 말에 고야서요 말에 세대 고야요 말에서
So for those
세델이서다 세델이 아주 타바침비 최냠len 제발라 세델이야 태바침이 제발은 녀리야 아니 기부 총어다 투모알람이 림바장 기부 중다 투모알람이 림바장 고야 녀바요 말에서 제고야요 말에서
So it is not certain or definite that in this life one needs to train in the practices shared with practitioners of initial and intermediate capacity before engaging in the trainings that are unique to a practitioner of great capacity.
니가를 남나 데르와 근데 제왕아마디와 제왕아마라 기부 중에 남미림바데 투모알람미로 로야고 장 사와 주나 안체델리아 안능은 주게 체델리아 죄념을 타바침이 죄 코랑 송샤바나 대고 기부 중에 투모알람미로 냐마디와 제왕아마 장 사와에다 고사바 장고 스카차고 말와 지선 체델리 코라 탑 데니기 타바침이 죄념을 다라 타바침이 냐면 대신에 고 기부 중에 남미림바 로장고야다 데네 징이림에서 로장 데니 신의 기부 침별함이 로장고야 차고 말에 고 그도 호란데 타바침이 죄 송샤나 디고로 와라.
Because for those few practitioners who enter into this life, having trained successfully in the training shared with practitioners of initial and intermediate capacity in their life previous to this, they will be able to engage straight into the trainings of a practitioner of great capacity.
디나지 지버와 나게 냠는 제발량 데니기 도이 냠는 제고 말까스 개왕아마데 데니기 지게 잠니 지자주심라서 냠는 제사네 아지 제텔이야 그도 그러는 나게 냠는 바치 티샤 용구로와.
And similarly, there are those who are qualified to engage straight into the practices of Tantra because in their previous life they trained successfully in bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness.
제사 내내 인자 당한 저기 개왕아마되어 기부 충우도 투모알람이림바 야보장 드니 기부 딩다 투모알람이림바 장매바 용구로와 내내 여바이나 가사델에 기부 개왕아마 그런 기부 충우도 투모알람이림바 장차제 드니기 그런 뉴바디 세델에 있나야 마냥바 여바이나 세델이야다 기부 딩다 투모알람이림바 장주 데니 타바침베 냠내 좀 받대 then Yan Jiwangama, Gibu Chung, the Tumolam Yuriba Jansa, Gibu Chimbu, Gibu Tinda, Tumolam Yuriba Jansa, Dinigi, Jamba, the Manyamba, Sosugi, Manyamba, Yobaina, then Sedela, and Gasore, Gibu Chimbelam, you could do Gibu Chimbelam Yuriba Tishan, then Jikore. And Jikini, Yama Java, and the Bekora Jesa, and Yansa in the Jangorwa.
And there'll be also those who, in their life previous to this, trained well in the practices shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. So in this life, they immediately can engage in the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity. So there's quite some variety possible. But it really comes down to whether one is able to start in this life without focusing at the initial level and start rather, therefore, at a high level, either intermediate or great capacity or tantra, depends on both having trained successfully in prior stages in the life previous to this, and that training not having declined. If the successful training in one's previous life has declined or degenerated, then one will still have to re-engage in that level of training and cannot skip or miss out that training.
Delia and go Australia, Chiglateral Patrocin, go member Changina, member Changuyovena, go Yama Jahadua, go Karakansam Chasavena, Gonijango Marwa, go Yaturim Mahachans and Tigorova, Carson Kunjangua. Then Jahadua Junior Chang Manyon was in Shini or Gonipajangorova. She just a labdra in Yorba, Labdra Shandajila, in the Dumba Chansavena. Labdra Shanda Sudu, Javan Makosuma, the Indi Damban Makosua Marwa. Dinashinda, Dumba Jeba, Juba Jansavan, Labdra Shanda Sudu, Chushino Kosuma, the Yanjabo Juba Kosua Yomara, Casima Jansarva. That the Jansa, the big corn, Jesavan, and the Engine Jangurwa, Chesa, Dinashi, Labdra Shanda, sending Dumba Jeba Jansane, and Labdra Shanda Sudu, Gonaba Jangoya Mara, Dumba Jebati, Yama Jansara, Corona Jansari. Jeva Majeva, China, Kubuchuban Jayada. Dinashin, Kubuchuba, Juniba, the Jansavan, and Shenda Tromla to do, Tromla Consuma, the Juni, Chichamo, and the Lapta Tibaro, Dinajir, Gibu Chungi Lamirimba, Tumo Lamiriba Jansa, Di Majeva, Yovana, and Gewanga Martin Jambena, Gewanga Martin the Kiw, Gewanga Martin the Kibuchung, the Tumo Lamiriba Jang. And Sedelia, Dinigin Majeba Yovana, then Giudina Tumo Lamija, didn't have a chimbala mirima child. Like Yawangama, Gibuchun, Tumo Lamiriba, Jingila Mirima Jang, Sarge, this was a Manyamba Yovaneda, and Sedelia, Tapachimichi, Kudukor Atisha, that you go about it.
In fact, in society, there's a similar process. So let's say in for example, India, one enters into a medical school and is studying to be a medical practitioner. But before completing one's degree, one moves to Australia and enters into university here to continue one's medical studies. Then, if one's credits can be carried over, then one can start at the same point that one had studied up to in India. But if in some areas those credits cannot be carried over, one will need to repeat what one has studied. So this is the same process. Or similarly, if parents move to a new country and they bring their school-going children with them, let's say their children had completed year 7 in their home country and now they move to Australia. If the year 7 in the home country and here are similar, then they can start in year 8. If not, they may need to repeat a year or two to come to the same level. So this is the same process here. If one has been successful in one's training in prior lives, and that training has not degenerated, then one will be able to pick up where one completed in one's last life. But if that training was not either completed or has degenerated, it will need to be repeated in this new life.
On Jizan, Cedelia, Kibu Chimpiki, 람냠레 제발라 인지미지 세델이야 안기고 진다 투모 삼바다 기고 총 투모 삼바 장마 조고 말에 세델레 장고 말에마도 안 제왕아마 디와 균에 장모 오베기 시고 말데 안디 투에 있냐 여러분 세델라 타바침이 최념는 제발라 세델라 기고 총 투모 람이르바다 기고 딩이람 롭죠 제고 그래서네 제고에 용해봐요 말에스 마도 안에 제고고 먹어야지 용구래 지르와 이내 기부 총원도 투모 람이르바다 딩일로 장 먹어래벨라네 디 말해서 그래 디 기왕아마 디와 인지미지 장고에 와데 장고에 차고로 와 제산 세델라 가서 세디기 기식으로 세델이야 타바침이 주님네 제발라 세델이야 냠는 타바침이 주님네 집에 가로도 기부 총원도 투모 람이르바 장 데네 기부 딩데 투모 람이르바다 장 고고를 베스는 딩고야 요 말해서 그래서는 기왕아마 디와 장사르제 디니기 장사제 마제바 요바이나 and Yamle Majeva Yobana, that's it, the Gala, and Chabachim Chibu, Chipacotina, Jigor, yes, do Sungor, de Lagorwada, this is what I see Wuruch.
So therefore, it is not definite where the starting point for each individual is in this life. The starting point for different individuals can be at different places. What will make the starting point differ is the success and lack of decline of training in one's previous life. But what is never the case is that any individual can completely skip training in the practices shared with practitioners of initial capacity, or skip the training shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity. There's no one who can just enter in, for example, the trainings of a practitioner of great capacity without having successfully trained in the prior steps. It's not possible. Where the divergence may be is in which lifetime the successful training in the preliminaries has come about. It may have been in a lifetime previous to this, or it may be in this lifetime. But those preliminaries have to be cultivated, whether in this or previous lifetimes. That will differ, but they have to be cultivated. They cannot be skipped.
Na ane anjuge lamrim nala an songdo wa study gewo chungo da tumo la mi ba jang dinda tumo la jang deni gewo chimbo cheme lam la jang go gre sa ji da lamrim nala songdo wa sine jike 제자 인지미지 장고고를 가서 람림 난디네 송도 왔어. 근데 람림 나 송어디 마디바 레베선 디발리 와다 제자 니 말에서 람림 나 송바디 가르친 송고를서네 녀만 데니기 기부 총어다 람이림 로장 제 기부지 투모 로장제 냠요 데네 메드엔 가서 사바 나 랍달 마선네 그 부사바 지레진 오스트레일리아 갑션에 부사바 사자 지레진 콜라브로도 진 당보네 로로 아마도 야에 줘야마로 언디나시 아주 강사직 당보 다 당보 냠네 제고 주야네 송제 데니기 강사직 아니 냠네 지야 탁바침이 쉬 상지고 파데 계획이 강사직라 심바티 송고 제가 데니기 강사직이야 당보 기부 충어다 투메람 이름 바장 데네 장조 데네 야 오저 데네 기부 드린다 투모람 이름 바장 데네 아니 기부 침베 투모 기부 침베람 이름 바장죠 디야고선 데네 나기 냠네 바시 제가 강사직 고림바진 당보 롭장 마선 당보 고주거는 데네 아지 데네기 림바딜 송고래 제다가 디 람림이 송야 돼.
In case the doubt arises, but hang on, the Lamrim says we all need to start here at the beginning with the trainings which are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity and then move progressively in this prescribed sequence. But now we're hearing that some may have done that training in previous lives, but the Lamrim doesn't reflect that. So is there a mistake in the presentation of the Lamrim? So this isn't the case. The Lamrim presents the entirety of the path. One may have started one's training in past lives and continuing now, picking up where one left off, but one will still have engaged in this same sequence, just over a period of lifetimes. What the Lamrim presents is how one can train from year one right through to graduation. So starting with the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, moving to those of intermediate capacity, into those for practitioners of great capacity, and into the trainings of Tantra. The entire sequence is presented here. And one can start in this life at the beginning and progress throughout. Or there'll be those who have started in lives previous and therefore can just pick up where they completed in lives previous to this.
that in the Lamrim gi ba sungda di sunya di da jisa jugi chue sunya di sanye jumden di ge karsum baras ne ngi chue sunya de ya 심주 지역으로 다시 지역으로 해서 송으로 제가 제 가르쳐서 뒤자 가는 길을 숨겨 봐. 뒤지 가는 길을 숨겨 봐. 가래를 공원에 숨겨 봐. 죄자 가려 봐. 차선 하고 봐 지역으로 해서 그래. 제가 다 람을 숨봐야지. 다 람을 롭장 지역으로 태바치면 취냐면 지역으로 인지 미지다. 기부 충을 람이래 봐다 징이 람기be 장지 도에는 되는 년도에 저주면 지부 톱사로 년도에 나란지 저주면 지부 톱사지. 다고도 태바치면 취냐면 지리 다 공도에 저주면 톱사로 봐. 신의 기부 충어다 람이름 받아 징이 람이를 불러 장고 그래서는 공도 장고예요. 막 저주면 톱사로 봐. 세상 공도 그도랑 태바치면 취해 그 잠니지 하는 냠네 제 디고소는 지거로 봐. 그래서 공도 냠만 디톱사로 봐. 제가 단 람림 나신지 장고를네 디 장고서 거 말아. 그래서 공도 뒤로 와. 제가 디네 자다 람림이 송바디 람림기 태바치면 취해 냠네 송야도 강사 간지를 숨고래란 체디 간지 치고래서는 부글마선 당보는 롭정 제겐 롭정 제면 랍라 당보 조한지 디 나신지리아 티신의 야주고다 티다데 두스제 마도 태바침비기 취냠는 때에 인지미지 다 저거요 말 빼는 연결 자주 마다 라예 자주 톱찬에 태바침이 취냠는 지도 콘솔리아 기부 충원다 투모하다 딩다 투모하람이로 장고래서는 땡고하요 말 콘솔라 제가 태바침이 쉐쉐션 지고로 받아 디디어 다들 람림 송다디 다 당보는 롭정 신의 사바 강사직 태바침비기 강사 상기기 최리야 당보 냠는 제네 고주네 되는마 고주네 가자 되니 고주네 그 기부 충위 림바 로장 징이 림바 태바침을 되네 태바침을 로자 되는 아리아 치네 되니 강사직 세대라 안두시 냠는 제 조도긴 되니 질 숨고다 송사 강사디 되니 질이다 치도 제외 람림 송사게 강사디 되니 질라 두숨고라 기부 숨이 람미 송야디 강사디 가서 세대라라 로장 당보 상기기 때문에 최 냠는 제 고 당보 주에 두시네 림바 치겐디 마도 예마 장차간에 되니 말이다.
Lamrim skillfully presents the entirety of Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings in terms of where, as a beginner to training one's mind in the Dharma, one starts, progressing throughout the various stages of training, entering into the Mahayana, entering eventually even into Tantra. It's all presented here. But we need to also take the approach that Buddha Shakyamuni explicitly told us, which is you need to think for yourself. Take my teachings, think for yourself, and apply them, and think for yourself. And in this context, thinking for yourself will mean each individual decides where their individual starting point is. So, for example, for a practitioner who has an inclination to the Thevadan paths and has entered into the paths of a solitude realizer or a hira and has progressed and attained the state of an arhat, when they then come to wish to enter the paths of the bodhisattva and they encounter the Lamrim, they don't need to start with the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. They're already an arhat. They will go straight to the training shared with the practitioner of great capacity because they've successfully trained in those prior steps. So therefore, what is presented in the Lamrim is ideal for those who have yet to or yet to gain lasting change to their mind and need to train from the beginning in the correct sequence to bring about that kind of lasting change.
Dini chi du chibi lamrim ki dusha dini chi le sungore se chi za duxin. Dan tewa chimbi chi kyang kyang sung sheba digi yun da di disuma sheba chi mani nga won ma ane je akarso de taba chimbi gi liu de ma ko zu shina di ro wa da ko.
The Lamrim then presents the correct sequence of trainings for practitioners of initial capacity, followed by those of intermediate, and followed by those of great capacity. Hence, it's the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment, the entire sequence from the beginning to attain that final goal of enlightenment. For those who are ready just to engage in the Mahayana, who have successfully cultivated the prior stages, then they can skip many chapters ahead and start immediately with the trainings of the Mahayana.
당이 너나 가르sun고라서네 주고라서네 태바침비 취에 냠는 제발라 인지 미지 체텔에 녀리야 기부 총어다 진다 투메람 이름 바 장고그레베스 인지 미지 장고예요 말레스 다데 람림 나라 장고도 송도 알았는데 람림 송야디 가사직 당보로 좀 해야 되네 가사직야 아니 림바지 티에기 되니기 티에 가사들 송고레스 dingi khabar yores chisa da nganjuge labral masona yinji minji zeni dangbo ne janggoye jida zeni dangbo ne jamogo zeni juba ne ya janggoye ni yunggo ro ba chisa labral gyune do manyong ji ne dangbo ne ma janggo ro ba chisa da kala kan juba jasa ne ne juji do go zu ro di na xin an ju ne gibu chungyu da samlo jimba gyune jang manyong ji ne ane jine gibu chungyu da tumala mi ba jang ya do ga chi che 다 디네기 기부 총원다 투모알람 이름바 장 차와시면은 기부 증도 투모알람 이름바 장. 다 기부 총원다 증니가 그 투알람 이름바 장 차와는 된 거두코라 태바침 비슈냐면 좀 마송샤 되다.
The point that's being made here then is that to enter into the trainings of the Mahayana, one does not necessarily need to start with the trainings of a practitioner shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. But the Lamrim does present it in this way for those who have yet to gain a stable realization of the training shared with practitioners of initial and intermediate capacity. So an individual, they need to assess for themselves where their starting point is. So just like if a family moves to Australia and the child has already attended some years of school, they will know their ABCs and will not necessarily need to start at year 1, but can start at the point they finished in their home country. So too for ourselves. If a particular individual has already gained realization of the foundational stages of training, the preliminaries, they do not need to start there, but can start a bit further on. But for the vast majority, one does need to train in this required sequence in order to attain the desired goal. If one does not start and train in the sequence, the desired goal cannot be achieved.
어디나 진직발이 아주가 냠는 제베네 당 지나 도에 냠는 인지미제 체델이야 가 냠는 제발에 체델이야 도에 냠는 제가 소리 롭정 제화요 말에 냠마 롭정 제사 찬의 개왕 아마디와 도에 가서 지게 냠는 롭정 제 사와에는 다 체델이야 마 롭정 제도가 나가 코로나 거두 제선 냠는 제는 이거로 빼네 전유선바 전유선바 쌓기야바 고부 주바로 시면은 딱고도 다들 되장장 냠는 지제 전유선바 쌓기야바 고부 주바로 레사베는 되는 방아 냠는 고수도 신의 잠인지 전유선 장고요 말로 그 냠는 제네 전유선바 빈변의 쌓기야바 고부 주바 레사로 제상 혼도 체델에 다가라래 나 코로 롭션 제선의 뒤고라 그 냠만 장사로 와 다 되네게 양식 체델이야 니마 되네게 장마서 도의가 빌 잠니제데 되네게 토네 롭션 균에 제 만용아 지나 제자 땅도 되네게 예 기우 제 타바 침비추에 잠니제 되냐면제 삼다곰 되네냐면제 되네 신내가 롭션 제고 책으로 제자 니나신 제자 가 롭션 제발 인지미제 당보 체델에서 오르다 이对롭션 제고를 체델에 제고야 말 개왕아마도对롭션 제지 냠내 야고 여반에 체다가라는 그 당복하는 아게 롭션 제신 냠내 제신 이거로 봐다. 다 냠마 디와 되니게对고를 롭션 균에 제 만용어 균에 장 만용어 지는 사바사제는 진리 당보나신네 진진에对고를 롭션 제 되네 아니 갈라간도 체도 야고 차야 되는 아게 롭션 제 차고라 디 직바 저타는 직바 차기도 와.
And it's also the same with Tantra. There are those who have trained well in Sutra in their past lives, and their training has not degenerated. then they can engage straight into tantric practice with no need to engage in sutra practice, because all those qualities have already been developed within. So, for example, Arya Bodhisattvas on the 8th, 9th, and 10th Bodhisattva grounds, they have no need to engage in how to cultivate bodhicitta and how to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness. They're already on the pure grounds. They are suitable to engage straight in tantric practice or in study of tantra. But for those who have not yet brought about such a stable transformation of the mind, they need to train in the sequence presented in the Lamrim. Because if one does not engage in the training in the correct sequence, but just goes to where one's inclination draws you, to what one enjoys the most, lasting change will not come about, because the preliminaries haven't been cultivated within.
Dini zadang hanzu dushine samdadang hanzu ki dini ki lobjong rachi mangbo chen de din jewa chima chik dini ki hanzu chue che ho brabe na jisa dading han che de le lobjong du che hanzu nyamlen che sha ba de hanzu le ma che ba che la yu be ne jewa chima che de de ya to ji ba che ro ne du dum de ko le la li go jisa dushine hanzu ya bene 롱아마 장차베네 달로 사바 차베네 아직 신의 권 장고요 말아 아마 장서 어디 장차에 당아 신규여베네 마신베네 제차바네 현재 장고로 와 지자다 롱아마 장차네 마제바 하되네 난 원마 디도로 롭천 샤만네 도로 와 야야 도로 어디 나신 아저 체들이야 지장 아저 장도를 제냐 냠네제 디네야 지켜와시마 지금 고바톱 한텐델이야 취지야 고브라도 한 게시도나 저 축식자 델람사 잔소 당제 나지기야 야 토알이야 냠면 코토아 조도에 지용고 봐 진짜 누우시는 장기장에 지는 거 야야야 저는 타바다 탐지 기부 고방 토베기 다년이 조고로 받아 제가 디네에서 먼저 디 롭좀 지해디 다 타바다 탐지 기부 고방도 다년이 조고로 봐 제가 디네에서 다된 두시바데 개와 아마디 이내 나가는 중에 디네기 냠내지 고가 위에 받아 디네기 지게 뜻을 장유백이다 고급 중요해 봐디 세부로 바샤 위에 받아 디네기 지게 몰람 야야다 디네 중요해 봐디 세부로 차고로 받아 디네에서다 돈나라 아주 두시의 야게 조한테니 주고로 와서
From what I've been presenting here, what you should also take away from this, in addition to where one's starting point may be, is that if I train now for what's left of this life, I train well in the sequence as presented here, I will develop strong imprints, maybe even transformation of my mind. Then I can have confidence that in my life that follows this, I've created the causes for further excellent rebirth, and I will be able to pick up where I leave off in this life. This means in my next life, I will start further ahead and thereby progress quickly, progressing towards liberation and enlightenment. So in this way, see the sequence of your training spreading over lifetimes. Because the reality is, that is exactly what is happening. Everyone has come here with various imprints on their continuum. So in this life, we try to build on those imprints, strengthen what we've come into this life with, make them those imprints ever stronger. And so by focusing on cultivating the Dharma ever more, and by making prayers that in lives to come, we continue to have such excellent opportunities, continue to have a focus in our lives on cultivating the Dharma within, then we can be confident that this sequence of lifetimes of training that has started in lives previous to this can continue through this life into lives to come. And in this way, the attainment of enlightenment will draw ever nearer.
다들 자 지금 제도 년마다 제가 있나 담바 제요는 양제 녀마디 파장도 요가신도 그러와. 녀마 장사와자 제베나 남사 요가로지 남 요가장도 그러와. 요가신도 그러와. 뒤세시라고 사바사장 장와 나신지 뒤세 먹어가지고 요가신도 남사 제자마 디나시로 와당아 저기 제 롭션제 되는 추기도 롭션제 안 제와치마 잼마스베나 한갑을 장에도 남사 잼마스에제 요거 지라고 고모고지 한 롭션산달이야 요거도야 용으로 지자디니 장아 저기 자들걸 가시게 남사 직장에도 남사 요거 신도 가시야 뒤에서 마고 내가 용도와 이 그런 게 개왕 아메기 장비기 바차다 되디토네 좀 이제는 다들 람사 제나 사바장 람사 제서야 돼 자고로 어디나지 두스 자고로 디자 나중에 바샤샤고야 다디 계신물에서 두스 거로.
You can see how this works in that if you now in your adulthood review something that you studied perhaps at school and haven't looked at for decades, it will come back. It will come back quite quickly. Right now, if you're asked to give a presentation on whatever topic it may have been, nothing will come to mind because it was decades ago. But by reviewing it, it will come back quite quickly because you studied it before. And if it had been something that you had been really interested in and put a lot of effort in as a young person, it will come back so much more quickly. So too with the Dharma. We'll see that some topics, for some people, they will get some topics very quickly and can move on to the next one. Others need to make much more effort in order to gain that first topic and move on to the next. This is a difference in the quality of imprint on their continuum, and the quality of the imprint in terms of the strength of it and whether it's declined or not. So with this understanding then, we apply to where we are now and where we can be in lives to come, and thereby give confidence to continue to exert ourselves in this life.
dine zadang zoge da lamrim yi che de che du sha ma lamrim yi pa sung che che ge du sha de la gan de shi es na dang bo ne ne ki bu chung wo da lam yi rin ba lo ma chang wa che an sa ba xin ye chang ju che du xin chang ju de ne jing ge lam yi rin ba chang de ne ki bu chim ba lam yi rin ba chang di sa ne de ne nga ga nyam ne du xin da ga sa chik du chi ri ba xin ne nyam ne che chu zhuo gan ji la de sung go re se lamrim ge sonsa ki chetu chega gansa dini chi song bare sa de da lamrim sonsa ki gansa nyamlen chi ken chetu chi du ja chi de dini simba de da re sa go hore da lamrim ge chetu chi du ja chi kan chi go hore sa de ki stiwa de na wa lamrim ge chetu chi bi du ja lamrim lobjang chi sa da lamrim chetu chi du ja de ka wa chi ora lamrim lobjang chi sa na go yang chi 기부 충원의 징계 바장 산에 기부 침별 남기를 가르치듯 남를 롭장 지고로 이내 곧 체도제와 곧 강준의 차상 장고 자고 말아 봐. 남림기 체도제위 두지하세요. 남림 롭장 제나 남림 체도제위 두지 인고야요 말했어요. 제자님이 디라고 남림 롭장 제나 기부 중다 투모에 삼바제바 장차바 있네. 다 기부 침별 남림과 롭장 지데 남림 롭장 지고로 와. 루아데 가서 람림 로저 기부 침별 남기를 롭션 시고 와래. 이나 람림기 송사 체도 제외 두제네 말해제. 람림기 체도 제외 두자세데 전에 당번 마 장제 치세 롭션 치세 가사도 고고 그래제. 제자다 람림기 체도 제외 두자 라도 당보 기부 충여 남기는 바 로장 아니 게팅을 넘겨 되네 침별 남기를 되네 나게 롭션 시게 가사 되네 질 고고 그래. 제자 람림 송사게 체도 제외 두자 람림 강준의 송사 지어로와 체도 나제 그런 송사데 지자 체도 두자 되는 시리에서 다고 당보네 기부 충여 남미를 로균에 마장와제 되네 바 신의 권마 티지도스 로전 제주원 제지어로 지간 가사죠 된시고 그래서
The Lamrim, or in English, the graduated stages of training for the path to enlightenment, presents this in the entirety of the sequence of training, starting with those Shredder practitioners of initial, and then intermediate, and then finally to great capacity, leading into tantric practice and the attainment of enlightenment. This is the sequence that every practitioner necessarily needs to engage in, and it is the sequence that every Buddha has engaged in. It is the sequence that every actual practitioner of Tantra, every bodhisattva, every practitioner of intermediate capacity, every practitioner of initial capacity, all engage in this same sequence of trainings. However, the sequence of trainings is seldom begun and completed in a single life, but is usually occurs over a multitude of lifetimes. Therefore, whilst each individual is likely to encounter the teachings of the entirety of the Lamrim in a particular life, they may well have already established the inner transformation or the realization of certain prior steps or certain preliminary steps. So whilst they may study the entirety of the Lamrim, their training will start at the point where they have gained realization up to, and they will train from there. So the starting point in a particular life may vary practitioner to practitioner, but for every practitioner, the entirety of the Lamrim needs to be cultivated within.
then how do you Lamrim chidu je do you say condition sungres and dination says it was say
So then hopefully then it's very clear why the sequence is as it is, and that we need to train in this way rather than just starting where we wish, but we need to train throughout this entire sequence of trainings.
Lamrim Biba Lobsang Dorje, Jisanji Wuchung Tumba Lamiriba, Jingi Lamirimba, the Nichimbe Lamirimba, the Nikaso, the Nagaram Giba, the Du Sungoedi, Jesan Dambone, Gine Colocantil Pa, Tigu by the Disungwares, Mother Injimiji, Tapachimishi, Yam Chevala, Namsan, decision but Dinashin in Drohoyashi Homa, that they that to Cabachi rather, say Wuru Chabik.
So it's clear that everyone has to train in every single step of this, in this correct sequence. But in addition to that, those who have already gained realization in past lives, and that realization hasn't declined, they will start somewhere further on in this life, not necessarily in terms of the study, but certainly in terms of where they focus on in their meditation. So therefore, one should, there's no need to be stating or judging others in how they're training, because they may have certain accomplishments. But we need to be clear-eyed with ourselves, where we are, what realization we have gained, and start in the appropriate place. So then we can conclude there for this morning. But should you have any questions, there's still time, so please feel free to ask. Sepal?
I have a question that was also came up with the Wednesday teachings as well, which overlaps a little bit. Just a little bit curious about Shariputra as an example of somebody training in the Mahayana and having a presence in the Heart Sutra as well as the Vajrayana Sutra, and being called one of the primary disciples of the Buddha who realized emptiness at the time. So just sort of curious that then he had that difficulty. So I just if Geshe could talk a little bit more about why he's such an example, why he's got those important positions in those two sutras, and why he would, if he did fall, what's the, how we meant to really understand his focus.
simple, heel simple. They in love. Kan dus Joseph Kisem love song.
이제 델리아 다 지단 자주심 동아래서디 가르친 라바레서디 줌체로 시에디 네 그래서 빛이 뒤에서요 현다지 제르불 가소를 짐발 가서니 가르 짐바 따로 시에서니 짐바 제로 시에서 짐바 당시도 아니 셰르비기 짐바 제도 아니 두스네 라보 연비기도 스텝을 해지래 제 라보 연비 제도 드네 라보 할이야 통종 다네 라보 연비 제 통종 지고래 아주 넘긴지 제가 켜 통종 배 독자에서 파 견주의 시우제도 드네 셰르보 제다 심지한 탐제기 된제 갈래 하버 심지한 지리라 되는 된제 두 민도 선비게 두스네 공바치네 아니 마 전시심 동아래서 다 두신 지당네 셰라디 배식하시나도 시고래 날 얘니 릭직 타바 챔피의 갑래 기시에도 시리보디 자주 연퇴기 추송 말에서 출 연퇴 말에 수퇴 말에서 연퇴 나힌제네 제사 상이기 최려야 상이를 콜이야 주투유 초도 교바다 리버기 초도 교바 니 용고래 제사디 시리보디 연퇴기 추유대 되네 아니야 상이님도 가와 변화직 상이 코로나지 가 폐제 상이기 최송비 갑래야 안시행게 하모가 대변을 라비아다 지워고야다 두신 지hen디 두신에 맞은 변에 직 두신는 거래서 지송거래 안 네, 장주심바 년도의 최종화를 해서다. 장주심바 최종화는 년도의 매나 년도의 인도도 세워야 인도도 년도 미션다도 두제되게 년도랑 해서고 이나 된 엄마는 년도 말에 된 엄마라 상계를 시고로 같이 된 엄마 상계기 추 안에 그 년도의 추된제 도시네 현재 주변 되는 게 세송 상년도의 최종화도 송타로지 되는 게 이유고래 네. 비타지 중데 도데 시기 말아 중나라 시기로 와다 되는 게
So the account of how Shariputra is said to have lost his bodhicitta is that as a new bodhisattva, so on the small level of the path of accumulation, someone approached him and made a requested that Shariputra give him his hand. So Shariputra, as a new bodhisattva, offered his hand. He chopped off his right hand and then with his left hand offered this severed right hand. And in the culture at the time, an offering made with the left hand is unclean. So this being who had just been offered the severed hand of the bodhisattva responded with disgust. How could you defile me by making this offering to me of with your left hand? And at that point, Shariputra thought, if I make such an offering to a being, offering my body, offering my hand to this being, and they still complain, they're still dissatisfied, how can I help all beings? And at that moment, he lost his bodhicitta because he questioned his ability to help all beings. And therefore, he determined to rather set out and achieve his own individual liberation. So that's the account found in the sutras. This then is explained, and this comes more directly to your question, but he's accounted as one of the close students or close sons of the Buddha, as well as reference in the Heart Sutra and the Dharmakata Sutra. So how can he be such a great being and yet have lost his bodhicitta? So in Mahayana texts, it is stated that he's actually a Buddha, but he was showing himself in the aspect of a hearer, and rather as a Buddha, he was accompanying Buddha Shakyamuni everywhere. So in reality, he was a Buddha, but he was really showing the aspect of a hearer. So this is how it is. Your question is explained in some Mahayana texts.
So Shariputra was really showing the danger of doing things that could help make you lose your bodhicitta. So maybe the fault was that he gave part of his body that you meant to him, an aria to give parts of your body. Is that right?
And yeah, enjoy that music that the Korange that Dandala that me Geshe Thubten la Richi Bendigo change symptom ware change symptom on the Yando Lam Shu ware Geshe Thubten Jigungwa Richi ko change sem kachu change sim because Yandu Tsusun ware mother Yandu because Yandu Mare said Geshe Thubten Nyungurwa that Geshe Thubten Nyung and the Yan change symptom ware like and Karachi don't ware said Yumze didn't race Tishi gore. Isn't that in the Nishigor? In the Anjuki, Delia Tishi, that it denies in Dushin, Jena and Parsi Yanga Yore said, this somebody in Anjuki couldn't go out to Lynch over it. Don't that to Lynch over it.
Yes, precisely as you suggest. So the purpose of the account of how Shariputra lost his bodhicitta is to serve as a warning to those who are aspiring to enter into the bodhisattva paths, to not be overcome by their wish to help others, but to use their intelligence and not to extend themselves too far. And so that is a meaning of this presentation. And therefore it is said that he went on to become a Hira Arhat. He had abandoned the paths of the bodhisattva. But as mentioned, there are others who say, yes, but he didn't really. This was just a display. He did this intentionally so as to make the point that you said, to serve as a warning for later generations.